In the spring of 1863, the Union Army of the Potomac simmered with renewed confidence under its new commander, Major General Joseph Hooker. Hooker, having reorganized the army, boasted of creating the finest army on the planet. His force numbered nearly 134,000 men, a formidable blue wave poised to crush the rebellion. Facing him across the Rappahannock River was General Robert E. Lee's Army of Northern Virginia. Lee's army was a shadow in comparison, mustering only about 60,000 soldiers. The Confederates were poorly fed, ill-equipped, but fiercely loyal to their commander. Hooker's plan was a masterpiece of strategic design, intended to be a perfect plan. He would use a portion of his army to fix Lee's attention at Fredericksburg. Meanwhile, the bulk of his army would execute a wide, sweeping flanking maneuver. Sweeping flanking maneuver. This grand movement aimed to cross the Rappahannock and Rapidan rivers upstream. The goal was to strike the vulnerable left flank of Lee's army. Hooker envisioned catching the Confederates in an inescapable trap. On April 27th, the intricate Union movements began under a cloak of secrecy. 3 full Army Corps, the V, M1C, and WM, marched with determination. By April 30th, they had successfully crossed the rivers, their presence unknown. They concentrated near a large brick mansion in a clearing called Chancellorsville. The Chancellorsville intersection was little more than this single, imposing house. The surrounding area was a dense, tangled and disorienting forest known as the Wilderness. Hooker, confident in his position, declared, "The rebel army is now the legitimate property of the Army of the Potomac." Lee, however, did not react as Hooker had predicted. Instead of retreating, Lee chose to confront the vastly superior Union force. He made the audacious decision to divide his already outnumbered army. He left a small contingent of about 10,000 men under Jubal, early at Fredericksburg. This skeleton force was tasked with holding back General Sedgwick's 40,000 Union troops. Lee then marched the bulk of his army, about 45,000 men, west towards Chancellorsville. On May 1st, the vanguard of Hooker's army pushed eastward out of the Wilderness. They soon clashed with Confederate forces under the command of Stonewall Jackson. Then, Hooker made a stunning and controversial decision. He ordered his advancing columns to halt and pulled back into the defensive tangle of the Wilderness. His corps commanders were aghast, believing they held the advantage. Hooker lost his nerve, surrendering the initiative to Lee. That evening, Lee and Jackson met at a crossroads, their faces lit by a small fire. Their cavalry chief, J.E.B. Stuart, arrived with crucial intelligence. The Union right flank, commanded by General Oliver O. Howard, was hanging in the air. It was unprotected, anchored by no natural obstacle. A daring and risky plan was born in the flickering firelight. Lee would divide his army yet again, a gamble of epic proportions. Jackson would take his entire corps, nearly 30,000 men, on a long, secret march. The march would cover 12 miles of winding, narrow country roads. Its purpose was to get completely around the Union right flank. Lee, with only 15,000 men, would remain to face Hooker's 70,000. Lee's task was to distract and deceive the Union commander. On the morning of May 2nd, Jackson's column began its arduous journey. The men marched in silence, knowing the fate of the army rested on their feet. Lee launched a series of noisy but small-scale attacks to hold Hooker's attention. Union observers spotted Jackson's column moving across their front. The movement was misinterpreted by Union command as a Confederate retreat. Hooker became even more convinced that his plan was working perfectly. Meanwhile, the men of the Union Corps relaxed in the late afternoon sun. They were cooking their evening meals, completely unaware of the danger. Their commander, General Howard, had dismissed warnings of a threat to his flank. Suddenly, deer and rabbits burst from the woods, fleeing in terror. Then came a low, rumbling sound that grew into a terrifying roar. Out of the trees burst thousands of screaming Confederate soldiers. Jackson's corps had achieved complete surprise. The Union Corps dissolved almost instantly. Soldiers fled in panic, a disorganized mob running for their lives. The Confederate wave rolled forward, unstoppable. The attack drove the Union line back for 2 miles. Darkness and the disorganization of the attackers finally halted the assault. Jackson, eager to press his advantage, rode forward to scout. He was accompanied by a small party of his staff officers. As they returned to their own lines, tragedy struck. Confederate troops from the 18th North Carolina mistook them for Union cavalry. A volley of shots rang out in the night. Jackson was struck 3 times, one bullet shattering his left arm. He was carried from the field, his arm needing amputation. Upon hearing the news, Lee remarked, "He has lost his left arm, but I have lost my right." Command of Jackson's corps fell to the cavalryman J.E.B. Stuart. May 3rd dawned to the sound of ferocious fighting. It would become the bloodiest day of the battle. Lee renewed his attacks on Hooker's main force at Chancellorsville. The Confederates captured a key piece of high ground called Hazel Grove. From this position, their artillery could dominate the battlefield. The Chancellorsville mansion, Hooker's headquarters, caught fire and burned. During the bombardment, Hooker himself was injured. A cannonball struck a pillar he was leaning against, stunning him. For a crucial period, the Union Army was effectively leaderless. While this raged, a second battle was developing to the east. General Sedgwick's Sixth Corps had finally broken through the defenses at Fredericksburg. They were now marching west to strike Lee's rear. Lee, informed of this new threat, once again divided his forces. He left Stuart to keep pressure on Hooker and marched to confront Sedgwick. They met at a small Baptist church on a ridge called Salem Church. The fighting at Salem Church was desperate and close quarters. Sedgwick's advance was halted, his corps bloodied and battered. Lee had successfully neutralized the threat from his rear. He then turned his attention back to Hooker's main army. But Hooker had had enough. Outmaneuvered and outfought, he decided to retreat. On the night of May 5th, under the cover of a storm, the Union Army withdrew. They slipped back across the Rappahannock River. The Battle of Chancellorsville was over. It was a stunning victory for the Confederacy. Lee, with his small, ragged army, had defeated a force more than twice its size. The victory is often called Lee's greatest masterpiece. The Union Army suffered over 17,000 casualties. The Confederates lost nearly 13,000 men, a higher percentage of their force. The cost of victory had been immense, and the greatest loss was yet to be fully realized. On May 10th, Stonewall Jackson died from pneumonia, a complication from his wounds. His death was a devastating blow to the Confederacy. Lee had lost his most trusted and brilliant subordinate. The South would never fully recover from the loss of Stonewall Jackson. Buoyed by the victory, however, Lee decided to once again invade the North. This decision would lead his army down the road to a small town in Pennsylvania. The name of that town was Gettysburg.